Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And first episode of the new year. So happy New Year, everybody. I couldn't do episodes the last 2 weeks because, as I was just telling my guests, Josh and Scott, I've been sick. I had a really bad case of bronchitis and I lost my voice, which is not really conducive to podcasting, and lost a lot of sleep and was not really feeling great. So now I'm kind of back on the horse again. And so welcome, guys. Happy New Year to both of you.
Happy New Year.
Thanks for joining me again, as always. And hope Santa was good to both of you guys. I haven't really spoken to you in person or verbally like this since before the holidays. So hope you guys are well. And
yes, knock on wood, so far so good.
So far so good. Mm-hmm.
Good. So this week we're reviewing the new Small Town Monsters film, which releases today, even though we're recording this 2 days early. But when this posts, it'll be releasing this day, On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Last Frontier, which is just the continuation of the On the Trail series from Small Town Monsters. And this one is a movie instead of a series. I know they started out with the On the Trails as series. It was like shorter episodes, 45 minutes, hour long. I'd spoken to Seth about this way back on episode 1 of the podcast when I interviewed him, and he was kind of telling me some cool stories about their filming of this. They spent, I think, a week up in Alaska, maybe a little bit longer. And I think he even at the time told me they were going to do episodes and then they kind of mashed them. I think they're going to do 2 movies. I think this is the first of those 2 regarding Bigfoot sightings in Alaska, which I think a lot of times we down here in the lower 48, we kind of don't really pay much attention to that. You know, we talk about the Pacific Northwest, we talk about New England, we talk about down south, we talk about Ohio, Texas. We don't really talk a lot about Alaska. So what did you guys think of this entry from Seth and company?
I thought it was right on par as good as, even if a little bit better. It seems like every he should he learns from the one before, so it gets better each time. And they had been up, and Alex and Eli did they did some of their own stuff there up in Alaska. So they really, boots on the ground running up there, did a real nice job as usual. That's a big place. It's not, as big as the Adirondack. I mean, but still, it's a lot of room up there, a lot of wilderness for them to be able to try to find a place to narrow it down where the sightings are, and to be able to get a hold of the people they needed to get a hold of, credible folks to talk to. Was a really nice job as usual.
Yeah, I agree. I in my opinion, that was the best one I've seen. And I haven't watched a lot of stuff from Seth. Haven't watched a lot of the stuff he's done in the past, but I have seen a few that we've reviewed, and this one by far is my favorite. I just really like the testimonies of the people. The location was amazing. Alaska really is just wilderness, just pure wilderness. I like how he made the note that, here in the Adirondacks, like where we live in New York, we have the Adirondacks, and that is wilderness for sure. But he makes a point that you can still see planes flying overhead. You can still get to a road at some point, but out in Alaska, it's something else. It's a whole different animal out there as far as wilderness. And so I mean, the stories from there just amaze me. And I really appreciated listening to those testimonies of the people there. So
yeah, and it's like he said, the film's title, The Last Frontier, and it really still is like frontier country out there. It's like you said, the Adirondacks is huge, but I think with one exception, every time you and I have been out there, we run into people. There's other people on the trail. Right. There's helicopters, there's planes. I mean, they may be high up, but you're seeing signs of civilization at least. And yeah, right. you walk a certain distance, you're going to run into a road, you're going to run into an encampment, you're going to run into other people. Up there, I mean, certain points in the movie, he was saying, like, here's this little town that's like 4 hours in any direction from other civilization. That's insane, like 4 hours. and just, yeah, I mean, the cinematography in this, again, just like, you know, a lot of their films, it's just phenomenal. And yeah, it's Alaska, so you know, you're working with great scenery, but it just, they really capture the scope of how remote it is up there. And you know, there's that one cabin, I think the guy's name was Scott, and he was up at that cabin, and they were having a lot of, you know, issues there with alleged Bigfoot or giants or whatever they were experiencing. And you can just see how remote it is. It's not something that's easy to get to, you know, and up there, you know, winter can last a lot longer. Winters are harsher. So yeah. And the witnesses, I mean, that's something that Seth is just really phenomenal at, is getting, you know, you watch a lot of these other paranormal shows, and a lot of the witnesses can be a little iffy. You know, you hear some of them and you're like, you know, this one's kind of putting us on, or, you know, his witnesses just tend to be really solid, like Scott said, just really credible, and you listen to their stories, and it's, whether you want to believe them or not is sort of besides the point, but they come across as sincere, like they saw something, they believe they saw something.
He had one witness, his name was Fred, and I have been following him. It was a nice surprise to see that actually that they had interviewed Fred for this particular film, which, you know, I was surprised, you know, not knowing that he would be on there, because I've been following him for a few months. He has his own YouTube page called Subarctic Sasquatch, and or Subarctic Alaska. He's been on Will Jevoning's show as a guest host quite a bit, and Subarctic Alaska Sasquatch, and he does a real nice job at that. And he's very low key, very low tech, you know, just telling stories, but credible stories. And I was happy to see, you know, that Seth had found him while up there to do an interview with him, because like I said, I've been following him now for past 6 months since I heard him on one of Will's shows. And he's, you know, what I like about him as a credible witness is that he will compare, you know, he says, as to a lot of the stories in the lower 48 with Alaska, they're not Big Brother of the forest, you know, keeper, the, you know, the good omen and everything. They're taught the hairy man will take you, will eat you. Stay away from it. There's nothing good about these things. They're not a good spirit to mess with. And I think that's kind of, you know, refreshing to hear, because everybody wants to put that other side of the story where, you know, these are all just looking out for Mother Nature and you'll be okay as long as you don't cut down a tree or whatever, you know what I mean? But he, you know, really emphasizes that point there, that, you know, compared to the lower 48, you don't get the stories of these being benevolent, loving, you know, big brothers of the forest type thing. They're pretty nasty things, truthfully.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, that kind of stood out, like the stories that everybody was telling you. They had more of a sinister kind of, you know, sense of danger. Like the people didn't feel like, you know, you hear some testimonies and, you know, the people feel like at peace with them, or, you know, but this, you know, it seemed more sinister, more dangerous. I mean, the one guy, and I don't know if it's the same guy you're referring to, Scott, but like that guy Frank, but there's that one guy, he had glasses, he was like in a bar or something, and he actually looked traumatized.
Well, that wasn't him, but yeah, he was getting emotional with the story.
Yeah, it's like he had PTSD.
Nothing friendly about that damn thing. Nah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. Yeah, I mean, to see this, right.
Well, again, they were saying a lot, you know, like the native legends up there are all pretty much across the board that same thing. It's all, these things are to be feared. They're going to take you. You know, like you were saying, Scott, they're not friendly forest critters. They're not, you know, going to lead you out of the woods and, you know, see you on your way and help you. And, you know, these are things that
you won't hear the stories of helping the hunter with a broken leg, carrying them to civilization and sitting them down on his doorstep type thing.
Right.
And what's, I mean, you compare it to all, you know, as we've talked about in the past, you have our, you know, Native Americans from coast to coast. Almost every tribe had a name for these things. but also some of them told that they were, friendly creatures that they, were brothers with and traded with. And then there's other tribes that would just say that they were nothing more than cannibal giants. But up there, apparently, to the Inuit people, you stood away because the hairy man was nothing to mess with.
Yeah. And I thought that was interesting too, how they mentioned they were doing like some form of like mimicry, like, mimicking like a baby's cry. That's creepy.
So
And it was almost
stuff.
always, yeah, it was almost always reported when a woman was there. It was almost kind of like to like trigger that, that motherly response to go to your baby or go to a child and go out and rescue them, out from the cold weather. But, they're all warning you, no, don't go to that sound. Or, if you're hearing whistles or you're hearing the certain sounds, don't go out there because it's some form of like trick to get you to come out.
Yeah, and you
Pretty
get
creepy.
a ton of those type of reports, in the lower 48 too, of them mimicking owls, or, I've even heard a ton of stories of them, when someone would call their dog, they would mimic the homeowner calling their dog,
Wow.
trying to get trying to get them out, for a ham sandwich type thing, or, but there's definitely some strange stuff though. Unbelievable.
Yeah, something else that struck me, and I've heard of this before, but it kind of goes into another level. Up there, they're talking about these giants. They're talking about creatures that 14, 15, 16 feet tall, which,
Mountain giant.
yeah, like when you hear about things down here, people are talking, oh, it was 7 feet tall, it was 8 feet tall, and that's big. It doesn't sound big, but you stand next to somebody who's 6 feet tall and you add another 2 feet to that, that's a big animal. And then you're saying, okay, up there they might be twice as big as that, not twice as big as a person, twice as big as like an 8 foot or a 7 foot creature in the 14 to 16 foot range. That's,
well, you know what they're saying, and I guess it's true. I mean, I'm not a wildlife biologist by any means, but they say generally the further north you go, the creatures get bigger. All right, as opposed to, the black bears in Florida won't get as big as the black bears, say, in New York State or Canada. And, apparently, they say these things get bigger up there because they have with the brutal weather and everything they have to deal with. They really have to stay on their game as far as eating, which makes them, which makes them, everything supposedly grows bigger the further north you go. I
right.
mean, that's what I hear. I don't, like I said, I'm not a wildlife biologist, it's just stuff that I had heard. But when you talk about those mountain giants, and I got into that for a little bit, and that's some crazy stuff all on its own. I'm not discounting it, but it's a night and day different than what Bigfoot we would talk about. Not saying that it's not real. It's just, and it's like the dog man stuff. I can only handle one cryptid at a time. I don't pretend, I can't get out there and start, being, Bigfoot's enough just to keep our Bigfoot that we know of is enough to keep me busy. But I have heard a ton of those mountain giant stories from the northern United States, Dakotas, Minnesota, up through there, up through Canada. And they were, there's a ton of reports of those things, 12 to 15 feet tall, leaving, 2.5, 3 foot footprints type thing. And again, it's nothing that I really dove into a whole lot, just because I got my hands full with just Bigfoot. That's why I don't mess with Dog Man or Goat Man or Moth Man or, all the rest of the men that you could possibly imagine. I try to stay right to our Bigfoot and Sasquatch thing, because you can go out in the rabbit holes for the rest of these things and drive yourself nuts. So I just stick with Bigfoot.
yeah, definitely. And we've kind of talked about that on the show before too, about like Bigfoot seen in like the Pacific Northwest, like Patty. You're talking about this big sort of bulky 8 foot tall Bigfoot that people usually see, whereas down in like Arkansas or Texas or Florida, you got more of like the skunk ape swamp creature type Bigfoot, which are typically shorter, they're typically thinner, they're smaller, and that kind of goes to, I forget that there's biologists came up with a law that says, I forget what the name of the law is. They mentioned it in the documentary, and I should have written it down. But yeah, the theory that the further from the equator you go, the bigger animals will be. So, if they're close, if they're in a warm climate, they don't need to be big. They're not trying to conserve as much body heat. But the further north they go in the colder climates, they have to grow bigger to have more surface area to kind of regulate their body heat.
Right. Now, here's another thing to think of too. All right. There are, at least from the sources that I have gained over over my years following this stuff, the different types of them. All right. Whether there's supposedly 4 types, with each having 4 subspecies of each. All right. Talking about just making the comparison, like the Patty Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest compared to a swamp ape down in the Everglades. Now there are many reports of 10-foot, down in like the swamps of Georgia, Florida, Falk, and that they might just be a different type of these, a type like a type C with a subspecies A. There's all that, not just because they're southern makes them smaller. They might be a different species or a different type of that species making them smaller. Not to say that there's like a type with the type 1 creature they refer to as the Patty type creature. Then you have what they're saying the type 3, which was what they really believe a lot of people are calling the dog man, even though it's not. It just has an elongated snout like a baboon. And people are seeing that, thinking that automatically, that it's a dog, whether it has the canine legs or whatever. That's remains the same. But you can still get, a ton of reports from down in Louisiana of these things being 10 foot, 1,000 pounds, just wherever these species. I guess as far as they said, the type 2 and 3 are, I might be incorrect, but Mississippi, the Mississippi River Valley and east. And then you have the west, like the desert Southwest down there. They have their own types that are, kind of regimented to the area of the country and with the deserts and the mountains and, that type of thing. But it doesn't mean that any of the types can't live anywhere across country. It's just that seems to be more where there typically have been, sightings.
Right.
And in Alaska, that they, like you said, no, probably sticking to our story, but those are just, big critters. And if they're a type 1 through 4, like we have in the lower 48, or if they're their own thing up there, that could be, I don't know. There hasn't been a whole lot, description wise, other than that they're really big and they're bad.
Yeah. I just, again, researching this, we've heard these stories, you've heard them, but typically down here we're hearing, 7 feet, 8 feet, maybe into the 9 foot range, but you don't typically hear of anything much beyond that. 8 foot is, I think, kind of standard on the big side. Even Patty, I think they've estimated is only like 6.5 feet tall. It's not a very tall one. So to hear of something 12 feet tall or 14 feet tall is really frightening. And it makes you wonder, is that real? Is that because, biologically it does kind of make sense. I mean, Alaska is huge. So you'd figure something living up there, it's going to grow to be pretty big. At the same time, it just, it's hard enough to accept, an 8 foot tall hairy man, much less something 15 feet tall. I mean, that just sounds like something out of
Well, even
fantasy
with Patty,
movie.
Even with Patty, I guess the official was 7'2" or 7'3", 600-700 pounds, and that's a female, which
Right.
is considerably smaller than a male would be. That's still a big critter right there, regardless. That's something I definitely know I wouldn't, unless it was a roadside crossing, I wouldn't want to come up on, because that, but that might be a good, put this on the back burner for, another episode, later on this year, is the mountain giant thing with the gugwees. That could be a whole other episode. We could do some research on that with those northern mountain giants, gugwee type things. And that's, that's a whole other thing that'd be really neat to get into.
Yeah. one of the things that, and Jason, you and I have talked about this before. One of the things that always kind of stands out to me is for larger animals like that is the sheer amount of caloric intake they'll have to do just to remain healthy and to remain like a certain size. You know, bears, they're voraciously eating all year, as far as I understand, all year round, up until they hibernate. And they're omnivores. They're they're preying on animals. They're getting roadkill. They're going through garbage cans. They're looking for grubs. They're looking for berries. What's that?
Opportunistic feeders.
Opportunistic feeders, yeah, scavengers, and they make a mess. I don't know if Scott, I know you've been out. I don't know if you've been out in the woods hunting or anything like that, but if you've been out in the woods hunting and see where a bear is, they usually leave a mess where they're at. They dig up the dirt, and there's just a big mess. You can tell a bear's been there. And it's I always found that fascinating that large animals have to have maintain a certain amount of calories or they're going to die. They're not going to make it out there. And but what's interesting is that you do see those predators out there. They are getting enough food to eat. Clearly, because they're huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
no lack of resources there for them.
Yeah.
Fish and
Yeah. Some places better than others. It was interesting how in the video they kind of broke Canada up into like 5 sections.
Yeah,
and I forget the name of them, like the Southern Coast, and he gave a few different names, but all of them had their own features that made them kind of unique, and some of them were better. I want to say the lower Southern Coast area was the better one as far as where like bears thrive, and I would expect to see more Bigfoot sightings in that area, but yet you still see them in other areas where they're just following like you would assume that they'd be following like the elk and the caribou trails.
Yeah, that lower coastal is more like a rainforest type near the coast, with the clams and just more resources than you would see on like the barren tundra wasteland, so to speak, of north of that. Yeah, but there's, like you said, they're still seeing them up there too. So I mean,
and what's interesting too is that they mentioned the lack of tracks, and that's something I've talked about before. It just amazes me how something that big isn't leaving just a ton of tracks for people to just follow. Everything leaves tracks, everything. So like something of that size, you would think it leaves tracks. But if you've ever been in the woods, and we have it out in the Adirondacks here, I forget what the name of it. It's almost like a mossy, spongy ground. It's like musk something. He mentions it. He actually mentions it in the video. But there's this type of ground covering that's in the forest, and it's very spongy, very soft. It's probably like this thick. I don't know if you can see it, but it's thick. It's very thick. But you see that out there, and you see almost no tracks in that. It's spongy. It just rebounds after you step on it. It comes back up. It doesn't leave the imprints. Unless you dig it up real good. But it's interesting how they said there's very few tracks in Alaska. But there are some places where there's snow, and they did show some of the tracks and some of the differences between some of the tracks out there as well. But it's interesting that they don't leave a lot of tracks out there.
See, and I remember that part, and I remember thinking that that's an interesting thing. But also the amount of snow they get up there, it makes you wonder if by the time a person, because again, it's a huge, huge area up there. So by the time a person moves through, are those tracks just covered up by the next snowfall? And we've done this just shoveling snow. You can go out, in a bad snowstorm and you can shovel your walk and you turn around and, there's already 2 inches of snow on the ground again. You can't even see where you were, and you got to go back and shovel again. And I think, that might account for some of it. I'm not saying it accounts for all of it, but and yeah, like in certain places where there's because again, when you and I are out, like, where do we see tracks? We're seeing tracks near the water. We're seeing tracks in muddy parts of the trail. But if the trail is dry, you don't really see tracks, and it's like, well, a deer clearly went through here because here's 3 tracks in the mud, and it's walking in this direction, and then as soon as the ground gets dry, there's no more tracks. And that's a very small kind of pointy, it's a hoof. It's going to go into the ground, whereas a Bigfoot track would be broader, wider, softer. It's not going to sink in as much, even though they're heavier. So I did find that interesting, because you would think with all the sightings, you'd think they'd find footprints.
And brings up correct, and it brings up the other question too, is, and do they, if not cover their tracks, do they know where to step not to make tracks? Are they, I don't want to say that smart, because that's not a right thing, but are they cognizant enough to know, if I step here, I'm going to be leaving tracks? I mean, there might be some places where they can't help but leave tracks. I mean, do they know how to step where they don't leave tracks? I mean, that's just, again, not just an Alaska thing, but there'd be like the people that see the line of tracks and then they disappear. So that means the spaceship picked them up, or they just teleported into another universe. But they do know how to sidestep or back step, or are smart enough to be able to hide their tracks or not leave them, know where to go not to leave them.
Yeah, that's another theory. Even down here, because again, a lot of you do hear about these like mile-long tracks, pathways where people follow tracks for a mile or 2 miles, but for the most part, what are people seeing? They're seeing 3 or 4 tracks.
Right.
And it's usually down by the water, where it's muddy, or in a puddle. Not every track find is this long, miles long, so yeah, I think you're onto something there, where like maybe they have to cross a trail or a road, or they have to go and get water. They've been without water for too long, so they go down and they got to leave 2 or 3 tracks in the mud, and people may stumble upon those, but where did they go after that? Who knows? It's just
the physical specimens like they are, and you hear some of the stories of how these things can jump and leap, and they're freakish, cartoonish. When someone sees it, that it's like you can't fathom what you're seeing, because they're like cartoonish, because they like the Hulk, just bow, and they're gone. But you hear a lot of that too, which I put more credence in than they step through a portal. I would think that these things, being the physical specimens that I believe they are, have the ability to get out of the way faster than they did if they were opening the portal to do it. But I still think, I mean, you hear a lot of these people, they just can't believe what they're seeing when these things, they move like nothing else. They crawl like spiders, and they, it's just, I don't know if that's something I don't think I'd ever want to witness, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was interesting when the one guy was talking about how he was driving down one of the highways there, and he was driving like 75 miles per hour, and he sees this like this creature on 4 legs. It wasn't walking bipedally; it was walking on all 4s, and it had almost like I think it was like orange hair, and it was all like matted and like kind of like dreadlocks, like hanging off its arms and off its stomach, and that the only thing that he could explain was that it jumped from one area to another and was at the side of the road, and then he sees it in the road, and he could see like the space between the road where the road stopped and its stomach, and it was this big space. And I thought that was great. I've never heard a story like that. I don't know how many stories are there more stories like that?
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing that has led me, I mean, from all over the country, and in Alaska now as well, that these things do the spider crawl that's the only way folks can, anything to compare it to, because you look at it and it's down on all 4s, and just like you said, just enough of the belly off the ground, and that they can get down to ground level to move stealthy as anything. And it's just that, that's just and there's I've probably heard hundreds of reports of them doing that, and it's just I couldn't imagine seeing that with my own eyes.
Yeah, and this is Jason. Maybe you or Scott would know this, but as far as like the large primates, what's their highest recorded like leaps from from all fours, you know, like say like a silverback gorilla. I could picture a silverback gorilla just kind of galloping and then just springing right up and grabbing onto a tree limb that's 10, 15 feet up in the air. I could kind of picture that, it being able to jump pretty high with its strength. I mean, it's huge and bulky, but they are fast. If you ever seen a silverback move, I mean, it's like lightning. They're super quick for their bulk. But I'm curious if there's any information as far as how high they can jump.
Nothing that I have heard, but
Yeah, I've never really heard anybody talk about that, but I'm sure they jump. I mean, and the silverback gorillas, as far as I know, they're not really much up in trees, as much as some of their other cousins would be. But I'm assuming they could get a pretty decent vertical or
they
pretty
had to,
decent
I'm
jump
sure,
if they
yeah,
wanted to.
I'm sure they're
Yeah.
pure muscle. Like a
Yeah,
foot
for sure.
spring.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I believe they have recorded them up in trees. I mean, and,
Have they?
you know, gorillas are huge, you know, but
Yeah.
they can climb and they do what's called a bluff charge, and you know they'll just go from standing to, I mean, they'll close a gap between you and them very quickly. I mean, they can, you know, it's almost like an alligator. Like they look slow,
Mhm.
but when an alligator wants to lunge at you, like it can close that gap very quickly if it wants to. And gorillas are the same way. They're very spry. And if you've seen, you know, monkeys, orangutans, or chimpanzees, and you know, they can jump, they're very agile. And you know, Scott brought up roadside crossings again. You hear about these things kind of, you know, people will tell you this thing crossed a 2-lane highway in 2 strides, you know,
Yeah.
1 step, 2 steps, and you know, it kind of steps out of the woods, 1 foot in the middle of the road, and then the other foot just on the other side of the woods, and it's gone. And other people will tell you like this, you know, it ran over the ridge and I chased it. And by the time I got to the top of the ridge, it was gone. Like, and did this thing just stop and hide, or did it clear that distance? Did it just, you know, but people will tell you this is not a man in a suit. Like this, like a human could not navigate this terrain, no matter how good a shape they're in. They're not going to climb you know, and you and I try, how many 45-degree angle hills have you and I tried to navigate either up or down? And you know, even without our packs, it's not easy. You know, people will say this thing ran straight up a hill, you know, 3 or 4 strides, and it's just gone. And like Scott's saying, like it moves like a spider, or you know, almost not even primate, like almost just
Cartoonish. Yeah,
cartoonish. Like it
that's
just
probably
moves.
the best, you know, was one of the encounters or sightings I had heard, you know, and the guy had nothing. He goes, it was like I was watching like a Marvel character. It was like a cartoon. He goes, but I'm watching this, and my mind just can't comprehend what this thing is doing, but yet it's doing it.
And one of the witnesses in the film says the same thing, because he says he saw something crouching, and he says it just stood up. And he said the smoothness of the motion, he said it just kind of rose up. He said he said I've seen grizzly bears, you know, get up on all fours. I've seen other animals, you know, try to stand up. And it's, you know, bears trying to stand up, they're clumsy, you know, that's not their normal state. You know, they're doing that to reach something or to intimidate. They can do it. They don't walk very well bipedally. You know, they can basically stand up. Can they walk bipedally? Sure. But it's kind of this, you know, it's almost like a toddler. It's almost like an 8-foot toddler. It's just wonky.
And that's another similarity is that, you know, talking about that you've heard, they think it's a tree stump that stands up, and it's almost like in a squatting position, sitting on its haunches, and it doesn't have to put its arms out like we would to push ourselves up, or, you know, roll to a knee, or, you know, whatever. These things are just gone in an instant. They spring from that position, you know, and gone like a bullet, you know. And it's just insane to see. But again, there's, you know, report after report of these things doing just that. You know, like you said, you know, they look at it, think it's a, you know, a burnt stump, you know, but the stump stood up, and it kept going and kept going, and you know, and the thing stood up, and it was 8-9 foot tall, you know. And it's just, they sit motionless, perfectly motionless, you know, until they want to move,
Right.
or have to move, or choose to move, you know. So, but you hear that a lot, you know.
You know what was interesting, Scott, was they showed a drawing on there that kind of triggered me to think about something. Was they showed one of the Bigfoot, like an artist depiction, and it had almost what looked like a ghillie sniper's kind of hair. Like just the way the hair was kind of flowing in the picture, it reminded me of a ghillie sniper where it's got like, the jute and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have to admit I'm into airsoft and stuff like that, so I made my own like ghillie suit and everything.
Well,
So
and no,
I know
you're
all the
right.
materials that go into that, but that's what it looked like. And I thought to myself, you know what? If you're in the wilderness and that thing's just kind of crouching there, it's going to blend right in. If it even has any kind of browns or tans, it's going to blend right in.
And
Um,
again, just talking like we, before with the different types, some of the different types have the smooth, shiny, short hair. But a lot of these do have just what you said, the dreadlocks, or like they look like a man in a ghillie suit, a huge man in a ghillie suit. They have the long hair like a lion's mane. You hear that a lot. Lion's mane coming down the hair over the shoulders and dreadlock type things. Again, probably typical of a different variation of, again, different than what the Patty or maybe even Alaska, type that they are. And most folks think they like Patty being apish, smooth, shiny hair. And you see other ones, like you said, with the ghillie suit type, dreadlocks, missing, mangy, dirty, filthy. They're like their knees look like callous. They don't have any hair on the knees or elbows. Maybe from the way they're scurrying around, on all fours or whatever. Just very nasty, mangy looking things, but with predator type dreadlocks only. What reminded folks of someone was wearing a ghillie suit. And that's just again, the different types of these things is really fascinating when you think about it. It's just you try to think about Bigfoot. What most people do think about Bigfoot is when you think of the Patty film, and it looks like a great ape face with the cone head, or the sagittal crest and that type of thing. And then you get the other reports of, just like you said, look like a huge man in a ghillie suit, and it was awful. I mean, it was awful looking. It wasn't. I mean, you've all heard the stories. Some of them, some sightings where the people who have claimed to seen them think they're majestic looking beasts, and the sun glistened off its hair. That could very well be, but the ones that a lot of other folks are seeing, there's nothing majestic. I mean, they are just they're monsters. I mean, there ain't no more else you can say about it. Whatever these things, if they're all related in a different type or whatever, but a lot of the ones, like you said, with those ghillie that look like a ghillie suit, are nothing more than pretty much monsters when you listen to the folks who's had sightings of them.
I thought it was interesting too, like a lot of the illustrations in this film, which were excellent, by the way. And I don't know if they were made for the film or if they were pulled from eyewitness accounts. That they didn't really say. They would just kind of show these illustrations. But I don't know if you guys remember, but a lot of them looked almost like trolls.
Yeah.
They just kind of had the bigger face than, and again, like you see Patty and her face is kind of in proportion to the body, but a lot of the drawings and the illustrations in this film, the heads, like they had just these long faces and they just look almost like trolls, just with the big noses and the big long faces. And they kept showing different variations of that, but they all kind of had that troll like Neanderthal, the big broad nose. And again, I wish they'd kind of said where those illustrations came from, because I don't know if they were created specifically for this documentary or if they were pulled from local eyewitness accounts or whatever. But there was a number of them, and I just took note of that they all kind of look trollish. Like when you hear about the troll legends over in Norway and Scandinavia and Europe, of just big hairy giants with these big kind of faces and the big noses, and they're kind of ugly. And they just look like trolls to me. They look like classic trolls, but they were supposed to be Bigfoots of Alaska. So that struck me. And yeah, I wish I knew where those drawings came from.
For sure. I mean, what did you guys make of I mean, he mentioned something about some of them having like horse teeth and some of them having like canines.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Again, back to the different types of them. Again, the most common, which is the type 1, the Patty type, block Lincoln log type horse teeth, like our teeth, only bigger. you know, and then as you go through the types 2, 3, and 4 and the different variations of those, they start having like baboon, the canines, you know, not werewolf fangs that are dripping, hanging out, but the longer elongated canines on top only. And then, you know, there's other, like some of the subspecies of the type 1 through 4 that they will say have upper and lower canines, you know, again, not pronounced where they're, you know, they got a mouthful of razor sharp teeth. It's just, you know, notice protruding canines a little bit longer than the regular teeth, like we would have, only a little bit longer. And then there's some that have on top, and tops and bottoms both. So again, leads you back to what, you know, it's not that they're seeing a Bigfoot. What type are they seeing? You know, now you're getting into that type thing, which is, you know, no one can really figure out. They have basically the idea of what parts of the country that the 4 major types live, but still, again, you're getting like, you know, we were just saying, Josh, up there, you're having ones that are being reported with just a black, irregular human type leaf and log teeth that are just bigger than ours. Also ones with upper and lower canines too. So there's a different, that's, you know, just biologically telling you that's a different type of creature, you know, whatever the difference is in them, but they do have the different characteristics nonetheless.
And I think that can be attributed too to like what kind of an encounter it was, you know, because if a creature kind of just looks at you, you know, like if you see my teeth right now and it's just got its mouth open and it's just looking at you, you're going to see flatter teeth. But if it's kind of yelling at you or screaming or, you know, and you hear a lot of these in the reports too, where, oh, it bared its teeth at me. It bluff charged me. It screamed at me. It made a face like it hated me, you know, and you hear these in the reports. Not all of them, but you will get people who say, yeah, it bared its teeth. It growled at me. And I think then you're going to maybe see, you know, because if it's showing that, it's like a gorilla. If you look at a gorilla and it's just kind of eating, it looks like it's got horse teeth. But if a gorilla, you know, growls at you, then you see the big incisor, you know, the big canine teeth, and you know, it looks a little bit more fierce, or like a baboon screaming at you.
Yeah.
Baboon is going to have those big,
sure.
you know, canine teeth. So I think that can also depend on the report. So for me, those are always kind of like red herring things, because it's what kind of encounter did you have? Like, how good of a look did you get at his teeth? You know, because most reports, you're getting a roadside crossing, you know, or you're getting something just in the distance and you see this thing stand up and move into the forest and it's gone. And you're like, okay, it was clearly 8 feet tall. It was clearly humanoid. It was a black figure. You know, I didn't really see the eyes. And then some people will tell you, oh yeah, it had, you know, brown eyes and I could see the whites and they were bloodshot. And some people get really, you know, good details, and I'm not discounting those, but I think it does depend on the encounter of how much of the teeth you're seeing, because the expression on the face is going to dictate a lot of that, I think, too. So maybe they all have big canines and we, you know, they're just not seeing them.
Well, there's a couple encounters that I had come across lately, I say within the last year. And the first one I heard really intrigued me. I mean, it really got me thinking. And then, a few months later, in a different, a sighting in the different whole part of the country came out, and it was like, they described this thing to a T, the face of it, and this was just absolutely wild. The first one was a hunter in Louisiana, was in the tree stand, and he had his tree stand facing an open power line cut out. And he had got there and he seen this thing sitting down on its haunches, and it looked like it was digging in the dirt. He thought bear automatically, you know, that's a bear. And then it just kept digging. So he finally said, let's have some fun with this. And he whistled. He goes, then this thing stood up and it couldn't find him. And he's looking at it through the scope of his rifle. And now he's shitting his pants, because what he sees is not anything he's ever known, you know. So this thing is sniffing the air trying to find him. And while he had the rifle sight on it, not to shoot it, just because he was trying to convince himself, what is this, what I'm seeing? And this thing ended up locking eyes with him. It started to come and it was locking eyes with him. And it went absolutely bananas, and it started ripping little saplings out of the ground, and it was punching the ground and digging up grass by the roots. And he said it looked like a Tasmanian devil. This thing was just losing its mind. and it started walking toward him, still a good ways away. But he said this thing let out the most ungodly roar. He goes, and I'm watching it as it does this. It would open its mouth and it was sticking its big pink tongue out in the air. He said the face looked like it caved in on itself when it roared at him. He goes, I have no other way in the world to tell you how to explain what. He goes, it looked like the face caved in on itself and it just one of those typical roars that, you know, rattle your liver and lungs and goes right through you type thing. Well, he ended up getting, you know, escorted out of there by two of these things back to his truck, and he had a pretty tough time of it for a long time. And then I listening to this other encounter, which was in, I want to say, West Virginia, and it was the same type of thing, that this thing was behind a guy's house and he kept hearing stuff out back, and he would hear different noises. And finally he went out one night and didn't know what was going on out there. And he had one of those old fashioned million candle lights that we used to have that attached to a battery, and shone it right in this thing's face. And he said the same thing. He goes, this thing let out a roar. And he said it looked like it sucked its face inside out to project the roar at him. And I went, that's, unless, you know, these two guys are in cahoots across the country years out, you know, and they've heard, you know, this guy had heard that story before and wants to make this up. But those are the only two that I've ever heard with similar, that type of thing, where it said it looked like the faces were caving in on itself or turning inside out when it roared at them. I just found that fascinating. Terrifying.
You know what that reminds me of? And I know this is weird, and I don't want to spin it off on a tangent, but it kind of reminds me of, you ever seen the movie The Predator? Yeah. Where you've got the creature and its mouth just kind of like opens up like this, and it lets out this like roar. Yeah. I kind of wonder if that's kind of like the picture I got in my mind when you were talking.
Yeah, I didn't know what the, you know, when you said it, you know, I mean, neither one of these guys, you know, compared it to like the Predator with the mouth, you know, I don't know, more opening up like that, but just, it was like you said, that the face collapsed in on itself. And that's the only way these guys had to compare it to. Like the one guy said collapsed in on itself. The other one looked like the face was turning inside out. You know, and neither one of them could, you know, say, you know, explain how they really wanted, because there's no really way to tell what they just saw. I mean, they were using the best of their ability, you know, to explain what this thing sounded like when it was screaming. That's that right there. Holy smokes, man. That's some, I don't know. It's just something else. You go deeper into, you know, what these things are all about. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they recorded some howls in this documentary too. I don't know if you guys remember. I mean, weird sounding stuff. And again, I mean, God knows what's up there in Alaska, but.
Well, you remember Les Stroud, when he finally came out and told about he was with his first wife camping. His first, I don't know, it wasn't a sighting, it wasn't an encounter, but he heard something that sounded like an ape making ape noises.
Mm-hmm.
That was in that same bay as that cabin is built. That was close to that area where Les Stroud was camping with his first wife when he told the story about that. No, actually, it was a second encounter when he was filming Survivor.
I think it was when he was filming. He was setting up the cameras.
And setting up the cameras. And he said,
he said like the trees rattled, and he said something. He said it sounded like a gorilla. He said it was like that deep guttural, you know,
plane going taking off. That was in the same bay as where they filmed that documentary where Seth filmed that.
Yeah, Seth mentions that actually. Crazy stuff. And then at the cabin, I mean, they had stuff going on outside. They had something move their cooler and again,
reached through there and moved that 100-pound Yeti cooler full of stuff. I mean, flung it across the room. They're heavy.
You sell those coolers.
I know.
At work, don't you?
I lug those things empty, and they're not easy to lug around empty, let alone full. But they said it was full of, you know, food and beverage and whatnot, and it just flung it across the room like it was a cardboard box.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. You know, some of the stuff that they had recorded, like some of it, in my opinion, was a gunshot. Even though they said that there shouldn't have been anybody out there, I think that's really what I heard sounded exactly like a gunshot to me when they were kind of like walking up the side. When Seth sent his crew down there and they were staying in that location A, I think it was, and they were staying at like that cabin, and they were just kind of exploring around the area, recording sounds and stuff like that. And one of the sounds, they attributed to like a tree knock, but at least one of them, I would, if I was a gambling man, I would say it was a gunshot. But some of the other stuff was pretty interesting, and some of the like the wailing that was happening. The sounds are pretty crazy. And what was really interesting too was that handprint that was on the side of like the siding of the house. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they come up with that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Josh. I feel like, you're out in the woods, you're hearing a sharp snap like that, there's a lot of things it can be before you got to jump to the Bigfoot conclusion, and you can say there's nobody else out here with us, but how do you know? I mean,
Right.
You go out in the woods and sound carries. I mean, a gunshot is going to be heard from miles away. So you may say, well, we didn't see anybody else out here. Who else is going to be out here? You don't know who's living in the woods. You don't know who's got a little shack out there. You don't know who's just decided to drive 4 hours out there to go hunting today and took a shot at something, So, for me, and I'm not saying it's not evidence or it's not Bigfoot, who knows, but for me, it's the whole when in doubt, you got to throw it out. You got to say it could be.
There was, there's I agree. I kind of start with the skeptical approach, and unless there gives me a really good reason to leave just the regular explanations of what it could be. Like, for example, he had said he heard like stuff falling from like way up in the trees. Well, I've been in a tree stand before, and literally a tree fell down. That's happened to me several times, and like the top snaps off, and it's like hitting stuff on the way down. It's making a huge noise, and it could be like 50 yards away, it could be 200 yards away, but it's super loud in a quiet forest, and you just hear it, and it sounds. I mean, it could mimic a sound of what people would think would be a tree knock. But when the guy was saying that he heard it up in the trees and it was going through branches and stuff like that, I'm willing to bet that the most logical explanation would have been like the top of like a dead tree fell off, or the wind kind of blew a little bit, snapped off a good 8-foot portion of the tree, comes crashing down, and and it's taking other branches with it, maybe knocks another tree that's kind of half dead, and that falls over, and and now you have this big, all these noises going on, and but there is a rational explanation. The most likely is that it's just a dead tree falling, or the wind's blowing something over, and it can be scary. It'll startle you because it'll come out of nowhere.
And again, if you have Bigfoot on the brain, of course, it's a Bigfoot pushing the tree over. It's not just a natural tree. I mean, because trees fall all the time. It's just a natural.
They literally do.
Yeah. You get snow load. You get just trees that are dead. You get a little bit of wind. You get just like I said, trees just die and they fall over sometimes. And not all of that is Bigfoot. And my thing is, if you're going to say the tree knock was from Bigfoot, give me an eyewitness saying I saw this 8-foot tall humanoid whacking a tree with a branch. Then okay, that's a tree knock. But if you're just hearing a knock off in the distance, is that Bigfoot, or is that just other Bigfooters out there trying to, you guys are all talking to each other,
I'm going to put this out here now, and I'll probably get a lot of flack for this. Just in, I don't know, all the Bigfoot shows you see, and I'm not discrediting it, like even Alex and Eli, they're out there, and it just drives me nuts. I can't stand watching nobody bang on trees no more. Again, you just hit the nail right on the head, Jason. Has anyone ever seen a Bigfoot with a club or a stick banging on a damn tree? It may sound like it, but still there is 0% evidence, and I know there's 0% evidence. I mean, you have the footprints, you have other evidence like hair samples and stuff like that, but it's the whole Bigfoot world is out there banging on trees, and then you have these Bigfoot festivals all across the country, and then you got people out there that you could win money for the best tree knock. It's like, when did this all of a sudden? I mean, this became now it's a cultural icon that Bigfoot bangs on trees. What if they don't do that? What if the noise you are hearing, if is indeed them, is them doing making that sound with their mouth, like a mouth pop. Now, there's quite a few other researchers that I've been following of late within the past year or so that really believe this, that just believe that Bigfoot don't walk around beating on trees with a stick in their hand. All right, because you listen to all those tree knocks and they're like a 22 going off, or they'll say like, like a fresh struck baseball and a baseball bat type thing. And then you see everybody's out there now, they got their little thumper bats banging on trees, and we've all done it. I've done it. I'm guilty of doing it. And how many times did you ever get a tree knock that sounded halfway decent? Never. The stick breaks. It sounds like a clunk. The bark flies off, stings your hands. You know what I mean? But now that has become such a thing that it doesn't matter. Even the supposed most knowledged researchers are out there banging on trees. It's like, or howling, doing calls. We need to take a step back from that. Because if indeed they are, what are you saying to them? You don't know what they're saying. So if you're mimicking something that you think sounds like the Ohio howl or any of the Sierra sounds or anything like that, no one knows if in fact those indeed are real. What are they saying? So you're out there just screaming at bellowing like a banshee in a bear trap out in the middle of the woods. And 9 times out of 10, there's probably someone who's a mile and a half over the holler that hears you and starts bellowing back. And that has for years been documented down there in Salt Fork State Park. It used to be that was the East Coast mecca for Bigfoot, until it became so overcrowded with Bigfoot researchers that you had 3 groups of Bigfoot researchers all bellowing at the top of their lungs, hearing each other, swearing to God they got Bigfoot on the other side of the ridge, and it's 5 other guys in a different camp.
Well, that's the thing. Like with Salt Fork, I mean, I'm in all these Bigfoot Facebook groups, and every weekend, people like, I'm going to Salt Fork. Someone else is like, yeah, I'm going there too, and that's like, yeah, what we're saying is like, are these just people talking to each other? And with the wood knocks, you're doing this wood knock and you wait in 3 or 4 seconds, like, oh, I heard another wood. It was like, well, did Bigfoot just stop and drop everything he was doing?
Exactly.
Grab the nearest big branch and like, oh, I got to respond to this.
We've
weird.
talked about this too. Now, I mean, I'm not a Bigfoot researcher. All right, I'm not boots on the ground. I don't get out there. I'm not on my hands and knees with a magnifying glass and can't tell you if it's a male or Bigfoot Sasquatch that just walked through here and how long ago. All right, but I'm going to be a firm believer, and we've talked about this. If you're going out there and you're going out there to just camp, go out there. I mean, if you're going out there just to see if something's out there, fine, but go out there and act like you are just having a good time and you're camping and you're not expecting anything. Just like when you two go out, you're not out there expecting to see a Bigfoot. Okay, you're not letting out calls at the top of your lungs screaming. You're not banging on trees with a stick. You're going out there, you're acting normal. And the majority of, if not all, of these sightings that happen to campers and hikers and everything else are folks out there camping, minding their own business, acting like normal humans would. If you got a fire going with a radio, having a few beers, acting normal, not standing there. Because if there is Bigfoot in the area, they're already going to know you're there, and they're probably watching you scream like a damn fool and bang on a tree with a stick. Come on. I think that right there, that stuff has just got to eventually stop. Again, like I said, I'm probably going to get hammered. You're a couch, but I'm a Monday morning quarterback. You've never been out in the woods. You don't know what you've heard, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't take a seasoned researcher to sit there and think, unless these folks honestly believe that they are getting true responses from a Bigfoot every time they howl or they bang on a tree and they think they're getting a response back. And if so, and if that is the fact, what's the response you're getting back then?
But you used the key word there, belief. They believe that the tree knocks that are coming back are from Bigfoot. They believe that the howls they're getting back are from Bigfoot. But is it Bigfoot? Is it just other Bigfooters out there? Is it just other kids in the woods who are like, hey, someone's knocking on a tree, we're going to do the same thing? Is it another animal? Is it another animal howling back at you? That, again, owls can sound freaky. Fishers can sound freaky. Bobcats can sound freaky. All sorts of things in the woods can sound freaky. And people say, oh, I know that's definitely not a coyote. Okay, well, it's not a coyote, but it could be so many other things. So until you can rule that out, it's an interesting thing. It's like, oh, we caught this howl, but go get it analyzed. If you recorded it, go again. Tree knocks don't really, for the most part, don't interest me because no one's seeing the Bigfoot with, like you said, like with the club in its hand. So who's doing it? Maybe it's just other Bigfooters who are out there.
And that's just somebody somewhere along the line has started this, and automatically means that's how Bigfoot are communing, and then, it all started from, one little thing, then it's the century clanging on a tree 3 times because there's 3 humans. I've heard that one. There was 3 knocks, that was meaning there's 3 people coming into the woods. There's 4 knocks, there's 4, and it's, and now in their mind, they've already have a system for the tree knocks that the Bigfoot are using. Come on. I mean, take a deep breath and look back at all this, go out in the woods like you two go. All right. You go out there to have a good time, to get away from it all. Don't go out there thinking you're looking for something. Just go. And if something happens, it's going to happen, because I truly believe if those things are in the area, they know the minute you step into their living room, they know you're there. All right. It's not, I think Les Stroud put it great. And I don't agree with everything that he says or his thoughts or whatever, but I'm very happy what he brought to the table with just the popularity of who he is, and the reputation that he has in the outdoor world, to turn his sights on this phenomenon. Okay. And exactly like you said, belief. There's no belief, because belief, you start getting into religion with belief, and that's not what this is. This is, this is a possibility of something. You don't believe this. It's if you ask someone, do you believe in that? You're talking fairy dust and pixies and unicorns and stuff like that. It's not. That's not the appropriate question to ask somebody if they're, what they think of the subject. But like he even said, the tree knocking and the howling and all that stuff is, go out into nature like you belong in nature, respect, go out and act normal. And if these things are there, the chances are pretty good that they're going to maybe not show themselves, but you listen to it too. How many, I mean, both of you, maybe Josh, you don't listen to a lot of the things that Jay and I listen to, but still, 95% of the encounters out there is just the average Joe out there on a weekend hike. The family out there that's out there, camping or out cutting Christmas trees or whatever. Never even thought, don't know what Bigfoot, never heard of Bigfoot. Maybe they heard of Bigfoot but thought it was a joke, whatever. I mean, that's, go out there and with that frame of mind, and something might just happen. Because believe me, I truly believe, you step foot in the woods, that's their home. They know the minute you step into their house that you're there. They're watching you set up trail cameras and all that stuff like that. And they know, just, like you walk in your house tomorrow after work and you come in, and there's a beach ball sitting on your living room couch that wasn't there when you left that morning. You're going to be quite aware of that. Just like these things are pretty hyper aware of everything that's going on in their home. And they would know someone's out there, screaming at the top of their lungs or banging on the damn tree with a stick.
Right.
Yeah, and I've always, and we've said that on the podcast before, like the best way to look for Bigfoot is not to look for Bigfoot.
Exactly.
Like, go out there, just have a good time and be normal, because that, like you said, that's who has actually ever gone out looking for Bigfoot and found Bigfoot besides Patterson and Gimlin. I mean, if you believe that, but otherwise it's always, like you said, it's someone on a hike, it's someone just going camping, it's someone not looking for Bigfoot who has the experience. So you go out there hooting and hollering and banging on trees, you're not going to find anything.
No, I wholeheartedly believe that. And I'm sure we might take a little bit of flack on that, because there are probably people that, have a routine of the different clubs that they use. They use this one on a maple, or this one on an oak, or this one on a pine, whatever, but like I just, like to the people like that, that's, I'm not saying we have the answers, because we know nothing. I mean, none of us know anything, but to the ones that really think that they have an edge up on us, I just want them to say, tell us 3 things that nobody else knows about Bigfoot. Just tell us that 3 things that nobody else would ever know that you know.
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to get at, before I forget about it, and before we close tonight, but I was thinking about the one encounter on the video where there was the guy who, he was kind of like a younger guy, maybe in his 20s or early 30s, that he went out. He said he doesn't carry firearms, and so he goes out and he took his truck out, and it had snowed, but apparently like the ground hadn't frozen over, but he thought it had frozen over. And he gets out there, and it actually he actually gets his truck stuck. So he's stuck out there, and it's starting to get dark, and he sees this this Bigfoot, but it's an interesting one because it's like all got white skin, and it's kind of like a piebald kind of color, kind of like a what are they called, albino kind of thing. I don't know if it was like old, or if that was just the color of its skin, or maybe if it was maybe that was had to do with albinoism or something. But the thing, like, kind of, I don't want to say the word, but kind of like terrorized him through the whole night. Like, he didn't want to leave. Like, he would kind of just hang out in his truck the whole time. And every time he turned on his flashlight, the thing was still lurking, just beyond, just out in the distance there. He could still see it watching him, hanging out. And it stayed there apparently all night. I don't know. What did you guys make of that? I thought it was a crazy story.
I've heard that, and it definitely, I mean, there was quite a few that I've heard in the Big Thicket area, Texas, people going down there and end up sleeping in their cars because it was colder than they thought it was going to be in Texas. So they moved to their cars, and these things come around, it's possible, absolutely possible. I wouldn't say that it was far-fetched, because I have heard a bunch of those where these things will come up and just basically they're acting like a dick. All right, you know what I mean? They're just messing with the guy. It could be like juveniles playing, like teenagers, because they can be punks, just like a lot of teenagers can be, just doing that stuff. Is that true? I don't know, but I've heard several accounts of these things messing around with people like that. They shut the lights off, they turn the lights on, damn thing staring in the window at them. It's like they get their jollies out of scaring the bejesus out of
That
people.
would freak me out, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, believe me, yeah. But listen to his story. I have heard several other stories like that. Like I said, in other parts of the country, especially down in the Big Thicket, where they used to have a lot of they used to have Bigfoot tours on a regular basis down in that area where Wes Germer used to go down. I forget the name of the guide, but he no longer does it. But they had that happen, and it was in one of Wes Germer's times when he was down there with a bunch of other people. And like I said, it had got colder than they thought it was going to be for Texas, and they ended up, sleeping in their vehicles, and they hear something outside and they flip the lights on. There was one standing, they're running by the front of it. You know what I mean? And just enough to terrorize them until the sun came up. Never did anything to them, but just scare the crap out of them all night long, which, they had thought was probably most likely the act of juveniles, because you get the big alphas in that they don't really make themselves known too much. They're so smart, they stay in the shadows. You don't see them much, but it's more the work of the juveniles that start to, that do the counting coup type things, to people, poke at them in the shadows and show up looking in windows and, that kind of adolescent, stuff we all probably did when we were teenagers too,
Yeah, it could just be curiosity too. You have, this thing comes up on a car, it's got windows, and there's this person inside, and it's it's turning on a light, turning off a light, and this creature's just gonna be like, I'm gonna watch this. This is kind of like,
we're their entertainment. We're their
it's like entertaining. It's just like there's this person stuck in the woods in his car, and he's behind this glass, and the creature kind of knows he's safe, because this thing is inside this vehicle, or so I don't know, that it was a weird story. It was a weird story, and then that's.
But I have I didn't think much. I didn't think much, odd about it, because I have heard a lot of stories like that.
Oh yeah, but it's
messing with people, like just.
It got to be terrifying. You're like in your car, and you just this thing's just watching you all night and like circling your car.
You hear so many of these people say, we need to leave Bigfoot alone. We're encroaching on his wilderness. We don't go out looking for him. they need their protection, blah, blah, blah. Well, then why are they coming up, slapping people's houses and peeking in their windows? Nobody asked for that. Why are they killing the farmers, animals or the guy's dogs, coming out finding his dogs ripped in half on his front porch? You hear that constantly. It's just, if these things just want to be free and want to be, they're the ones initiating a lot of this trouble with a lot of stuff, especially you get down in the Southeast, you get down the southern states, in Texas, in that, where you hear, I could listen to stories of them all night long, where people calling in, they're just absolutely terrified. This thing's just walking around their house, slapping on the house, dragging its fingers, down the side of their house. They go up, there's dents in the siding where it's banged on 8 feet up, dents 8 feet up above their bedroom window, knocking pictures off the wall, that type of thing. It's just, it's amazing, you still have that camp where Bigfoot just wants to be left alone, leave him be.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because again, here in the lower 48, you can say, yeah, we're encroaching on their territory, and they're showing their anger. But you have up in Alaska, it's all frontier. If you have a cabin in the woods that's 4 hours from any other civilization, why does a Bigfoot feel like it's got to come to that cabin and right. Hundreds of square miles and be like, I'm going to go to this one little human encampment and slap on the
that's
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We lost
you disappeared.
You
We lost you there for a minute, but okay. You're back. But we'll start wrapping up because we're getting I know everybody's tired, it's late, but so I think we're all in general consensus that overall this was a really good doc. I think Seth brings a real level head to all his documentaries. Everything is just approached with respect, healthy open-mindedness, and great witnesses. He's not really showcasing anybody that you'd say, I kind of don't believe this guy. You may not believe that he saw Bigfoot or right. that he saw a UFO or whatever, whatever the documentary is, but you're always kind of like, this person believes they saw what they say they saw. This is not somebody who's putting us on or a frustrated actor,
No, he does it right because he's not filling it with clips of, outlandish claims or, that sort of thing. And just everyone, he's just getting better, everyone. The sky's the limit for him with what he decides, how he keeps, and he's on the right path. And I'm very happy that we have in this, I'm not so much, I like all his stuff, but I'm just pretty much a Bigfoot guy. I enjoy UFOs and ghosts and all that too. I'll watch them all, but what I know about and comment and can give him the props is the Bigfoot stuff that he's out. And we're very fortunate to have him representing the subject like he is right now, because he's doing it right. He's fantastic, and always love to listen to his stuff because it's not too far one way or the other, and he keeps it on level playing ground, and at the end of it, you enjoy what you've just watched. So once again I give him all the thumbs up for this one because everyone gets better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely got to give him props for this one. So far it's my favorite one, and I don't watch a lot of Bigfoot shows, like you guys have heard me say that before, and this was really interesting. I could have watched another 2-3 hours of it. It was that good. I really appreciated the way he approached the subject, and the testimonies, the cinematography was great. I definitely give this an A+ as far as a film.
Yeah, I agree. I love Seth's stuff, not just because he's been on the show. He knows I've criticized him in the past. He's said that. But yeah, he's getting, the films just get better and better, and it's just a refreshingly sober look at these topics that you don't get on TV. You watch Discovery or the Travel Channel or like any of these cable shows, and it's atrocious what makes it onto TV. It's atrocious what's out there.
He's all we got, really. Like
he's all we got, really.
Yeah.
There's been a few out there sprinkled. Jay Bachochin with Finding Jay, he does a pretty good job with his documentaries, but he's only done 2. But Seth just churns them out, and it's not just the full length stuff. It's the stuff on YouTube. It's the episodic stuff. It's stuff that Alex and Eli do. stuff that Shannon does with on the trail of UFOs. Like I don't know when this guy sleeps,
Well, we
honestly.
gotta ask him though, if he does happen to watch this, what's going on in the property in Ohio? We've kind of been waiting to see, you've done your
Yeah.
little bits down there and haven't seen anything going on. I don't know, it's probably, I don't know when he find the time to be able to do it, but they were very enjoyable. The cabin there, was outside of Minerva, I believe, when they're down in Ohio. What a nice, I waited every week for the next one to come out because they were awesome, so I don't know if I just hasn't had time to get out there to film anything, or, it's just schedule. I imagine it's quite tough, but I'd like to see him back at it if anything's going on down there, because that was really interesting.
Yeah, he's got just so much good stuff. And Josh, I know if you wanted to watch more, there's stuff on their YouTube channel. If you go to the Small Town Monsters, I know Alex and Eli do. It's almost like a companion piece to this film. It's about Alaska, so, and it's a lot of the same people, so it's kind of like an addendum to this. So if you want to check that out, that's on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely check it out.
Did you just see his one? It was a half-hour one last night in West Virginia, was it? Alex by himself. He had
I have. I mean, I'm so far behind on that stuff. I mean, being sick the past 2 weeks, I didn't watch anything because I couldn't even focus. I was like, I'm going to watch this stuff and not even.
This one was only like a half-hour long, and he was doing it. I guess it was right before Thanksgiving. He was out there and just did a few-hour research by himself out there, and it was pretty cool. Watch it.
Yeah, definitely.
They always do good stuff. So
yeah, it's high quality. It's always like I said, like a sober look. It's never sensationalized. It's never like, this is definitely Bigfoot. They just kind of present stuff. Here's your witnesses. Here's what they told us. You guys make up your own mind, and it's all consistently good, and it just gets better and better. So yeah, this was a good one. Everybody check it out. It's out today. Small Town Monsters on the Trail of Bigfoot: The Last Frontier. Josh, Scott, thanks for joining me. I'm gonna end this. I know Josh is very tired.
Been a long day.
long day. So I appreciate we went a little bit longer than I had hoped, but always a good conversation with you guys. We could talk for hours. But yeah, we'll wrap it up here. So let you guys get some sleep.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes,
all right.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Anytime, guys. Anytime. My co-hosts, guests and co-hosts. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Good night, Josh. Good night, Scott.
Good night.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. I want to thank Josh and Scott for coming on and talking about the new Small Town Monsters documentary on the Trail of Bigfoot: The Last Frontier. Awesome flick. Check it out. Just want to give a few shout outs before I say goodbye this episode. Two Ghouls podcast. Check them out. Katie and Sam. Awesome shows. I watch them every Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern on their YouTube. They do a live show. They're awesome. They're so funny. So cool. They always have good discussions. So check them out. Some listeners I want to say hi to. Christy, Lori, Rebecca, Stephanie, Sean, Jake, Gary, my dad. Thanks for watching. John, my buddy John, who's been on the show many times, is a huge supporter of the show. Thank you. So everybody, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Rock and roll.
Moonlight glowing, it fades on me and you, casting dancing shadows. The earth is draped in blue. Here in this moment, time is standing still. Take it all away. is